sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are going to unpack something that might sound a little dry at first. Government spending.
Oh, yeah.
But trust me, this is about to get really interesting.
I believe it.
Because we're talking about a recent wave of lawsuits against DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency.
Interesting.
A big Trump-era initiative promising to cut billions from the federal budget.
That's right. And, you know, it's not just the sheer amount of money they're aiming to cut.
Yeah.
It's a whopping $500 billion.
Wow.
It's the timing of these lawsuits that's really raising eyebrows. They're hitting right as Trump begins his second term, and it seems no coincidence that people are suddenly questioning how DOGE operates.
Okay, so $500 billion is serious money.
For sure.
There's a lot at stake here.
Huge stakes.
But these lawsuits aren't about the amount being cut, right?
Right.
What are they actually claiming?
The heart of the matter is the Federal Advisory Committee Act, FACA for short. It's basically a rule book designed to ensure that federal advisory committees operate with transparency and represent a diverse range of viewpoints.
Makes sense.
And the lawsuits allege that DOGE is acting like an advisory committee, offering recommendations that directly impact federal agencies. But it's not playing by FACA's rules.
So they're claiming DOGE is trying to bypass this whole system of checks and balances.
Precisely. The lawsuits point to a lack of transparency surrounding DOGE's meetings and membership.
Yeah.
They're arguing there isn't enough public information available about who's involved in the decision-making process.
It sounds like there's a concern about who exactly has DOGE's ear.
Right.
The article mentions 2 rejected applicants, one representing national security and the other frequently representing federal employees.
Interesting.
That feels significant.
It does.
Why were these specific examples chosen?
Yeah.
And what does it tell us about the concerns being raised?
It certainly seems like a deliberate choice.
Yeah.
You see, these individuals could bring the valuable and potentially critical perspectives to the table.
I see.
The fact that their applications were seemingly ignored adds weight to the claim that DOGE is intentionally excluding certain viewpoints.
And why is that exclusion such a big deal?
Right.
Couldn't someone argue that a streamlined, focused approach is actually more efficient?
That's where it gets complicated.
Okay.
You're right. Sometimes too many cooks in the kitchen can lead to gridlock. But FACA exists for a reason. History is full of examples where advisory committees with limited representation ended up making poorly informed decisions.
Oh, wow.
Decisions that ended up costing taxpayers even more money in the long run.
That's what's so interesting here.
Yeah.
DOGE was supposed to be all about cutting waste.
Right.
But these lawsuits suggest they might be creating even more inefficiency by not playing by the rules.
Exactly. And there's a real danger that without input from diverse stakeholders, DOGE's recommendations could backfire.
Yeah.
Think about it. If you're trying to make the government more efficient, wouldn't you want to hear from the people who actually know how the system works?
Absolutely. I mean, wouldn't you want input from the folks on the ground, the ones dealing with the everyday realities of government work?
Exactly.
It seems like excluding those voices could lead to some pretty big blind spots.
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And this isn't just about theoretical efficiency. It's about fairness, too.
Right, and that brings us back to those rejected applicants.
Yeah.
This seems to be a story about more than just bureaucratic processes.
I agree.
This is about whose voices get heard when it comes to deciding how taxpayer money is spent.
Yes, and it raises a bigger question about the potential consequences of prioritizing speed and efficiency over transparency and inclusivity.
Yeah.
And the stakes get even higher when you factor in another recent development.
Oh.
Vivek Ramaswamy, one of the key figures behind DOGE, is planning to leave the initiative to run for governor of Ohio.
Okay, so on top of potential legal challenges and accusations of bias, now we have a major leadership shakeup on the horizon.
It's true.
Talk about a curveball. This DOGE situation is definitely more complex than meets the eye.
I think so. It certainly adds another layer of uncertainty. Ramaswamy has been a driving force behind DOGE, and his departure could significantly impact the initiative's trajectory.
Right.
Who might step into his shoes? Will they maintain the same course, or will we see a shift in priorities?
That's a great question. I'm curious, what are some of the possible scenarios here?
Well,
if Ramaswamy leaves and DOGE is forced to become more transparent, how might that impact their work?
Well, increased transparency could mean more. Public scrutiny, more time spent responding to inquiries, and potentially even congressional hearings. This could definitely slow down the process of identifying and implementing cost-saving measures.
Right.
Some might argue that it hinders DOGE's effectiveness, while others would say it's a necessary step to ensure accountability and build public trust.
It's almost like a paradox, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to make the government more efficient, but these legal challenges could force them to adopt processes that seem less efficient on the surface.
Exactly. And it gets even more complicated when you consider the potential outcomes of the lawsuits.
Yeah.
If the courts rule against DOGE, it could mean a significant restructuring.
Oh, wow.
Maybe even bringing them under the direct purview of FACA.
Okay.
Or in a more extreme scenario, the initiative could be halted altogether.
Wow. So the future of this whole $500 billion cost-cutting plan is hanging in the balance.
It is.
That's wild.
It really is, and it underscores just how complex this issue is. There's a genuine desire to reduce government waste.
For sure.
But the question is, how do you do it effectively and ethically?
Right.
How do you balance the need for efficiency with the principles of good governance?
It's like trying to navigate a minefield.
I know, right?
One wrong step and the whole thing explodes. This brings us to a crucial question for our listener.
Okay.
Why should they care about this legal battle over government committees? It seems pretty far removed from everyday life.
It might seem that way at first glance, but the reality is that government spending impacts everyone.
Yeah.
Every dollar the government spends comes from somewhere, whether it's taxes, borrowing, or other means. How that money is allocated affects everything from the quality of our schools and infrastructure to funding for scientific research and social programs.
So even if someone isn't directly involved in government work, these decisions have a ripple effect across society.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And while most people would agree that cutting waste is important, the methods used to achieve those cuts matter.
Right.
If DOGE's recommendations are based on a limited perspective, or if the process lacks transparency, it could lead to unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Cuts that ultimately harm the very people those programs are designed to help.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just about cutting for the sake of cutting.
Right.
It's about making sure those cuts are strategic and don't undermine essential services.
Precisely. And that's why this story is worth paying attention to.
Okay.
The outcome of these lawsuits could have a major impact on how the government operates, how taxpayer money is spent, and ultimately how those decisions impact our lives.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. You know, it's easy to get caught up in the headlines about cutting billions, but you've really highlighted the nuances here. There's so much more to this story than meets the eye.
And it's a story that's still unfolding.
Yeah.
It'll be fascinating to see how DOGE adapts to these legal challenges and what long-term impact this will have on government efficiency efforts.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential pitfalls of DOGE's approach, but let's flip the script for a moment.
Okay.
If you were advising DOGE, what steps would you recommend to ensure fairness, transparency, and ultimately effectiveness?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
You want to streamline processes and eliminate waste.
Right.
But you also need to ensure that decisions are made with a full understanding of the complexities involved and with input from those who are most impacted.
Right. It's not just about crunching numbers and slashing budgets.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the human element, the real-world consequences of these decisions.
Exactly. If I were advising DOGE, I'd encourage them to embrace a more inclusive approach.
Okay.
Actively seek input from federal employees, from unions, from advocacy groups.
Yeah.
Even from those who might be critical of the initiative.
So create a space where diverse perspectives can be heard, even if they clash.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that slow things down considerably?
It might, but consider the potential benefits.
Okay.
Imagine tapping into the expertise of the people who work within these agencies day in and day out.
Yeah.
They have insights that outsiders simply wouldn't have. And by incorporating these diverse viewpoints, DOGE could avoid costly mistakes and build trust with the very people they're trying to serve.
That makes sense. It's like if you're trying to fix a car, wouldn't you want to talk to the mechanic who knows the engine inside and out?
Exactly.
You wouldn't just start ripping out parts based on a hunch.
Right. And alongside greater inclusivity, transparency is key.
Yeah.
Open meetings.
Yeah.
Clear guidelines for membership public access to reports and recommendations.
Okay.
This would demonstrate that DOGE is truly committed to responsible governance, not just operating in a black box.
That openness could go a long way in building public confidence.
For sure.
People are more likely to support an initiative if they understand how it works and feel like their voices are being considered.
Absolutely. And ultimately, DOGE's effectiveness should be measured not just in dollars saved,
Right.
but in the long-term impact on government services and the well-being of the people those services are meant to help.
So it's about more than just trimming the fat. It's about making sure those cuts lead to a better, more efficient system that actually benefits people.
Exactly. It requires a holistic approach, one that balances the need for efficiency with the principles of fairness, transparency, and accountability.
Wow, what a journey this has been. We started with lawsuits and ended up talking about the very heart of good governance. What about you, listener?
Yeah.
How much do you think about government spending and the way it impacts your life? Does the story change your perspective at all?
It's a topic we should all be thinking about. Hopefully this deep dive has sparked some curiosity and maybe even a bit of healthy skepticism.
That's what we aim for here at The Deep Dive. We want to leave you with more questions than answers and encourage you to keep exploring these complex issues. If you come across any new developments in the story, or if you have any thoughts you'd like to share, please reach out. We're always eager to hear from our listeners. Until next time, keep diving deep.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.